Hey Camaro family, this video is going to cover the rebuild of a TPI fuel rail system for 1985 to 1992 Camaro, and it's also going to cover the rebuild of a TPI for a Corvette of the same era. So the difference between the Corvette and the Camaro will be these fuel lines. The feed and return lines are going to be different configuration for the Corvette. This one is for a Camaro. So the basics of the system is the left fuel rail system, the left fuel rail, the right fuel rail, the transfer tube, which goes between the two, goes in there, and the rear transfer tube, which goes in from the fuel rail into the fuel pressure regulator, and then another transfer tube that goes in the side of the inside of the fuel pressure regulator, and then into the fuel rail. So these transfer tubes will all get new O-rings, and then you've got your bracket to hold the fuel pressure regulator to the fuel rail, and also the clips and bolts. And then the cold start injector will get a new O-ring. This O-ring will get replaced on the bottom of the cold start injector, and the O-ring that goes up here will also be replaced. The O-ring that's inside of this is not part of this rebuild, but if you need to get the service of replacing the injector, to remove the injector from this little rail here, from the cold start rail, you can bend this tab up very lightly, just enough to clear that cold start injector, and you can twist the cold start injector off of there and keep rotating it to get it off of there, and then there's no ring under there. So that's not part of this rebuild, but just wanted to let you know how to do that. This tab just goes back down like that. So that's the cold start injector. And for tools, for the bolts that hold the fuel pressure regulator and the tabs on, that is a T25. That's a T25 Torx for all these. And for the fuel pressure regulator, to do the service on that, you see these bolts have the little tamper-proof nub in the center. So you got to get the right, that's a T10. So this one is a T10 tamper-proof. And then you need an O-ring pick, an inch-pound torque wrench to do the torques correctly. And then for the fuel pressure regulator, we're going to replace the diaphragm in there, because you can hear that. So the diaphragm, when it wears out, some of them even come new where they make a noise like that. And when the fuel pressure is going up and down to transfer the fuel back to the tank, when it moves up and down, it'll start with a clicking noise, and you'll hear a clicking noise, which could be mistaken for a lifter tick under the hood or an exhaust leak that ticks. So if you hear that and you think there's a lifter noise or an exhaust tick, it could be this fuel pressure regulator making noise because it pushes down and keeps tapping the bottom of the fuel pressure regulator housing. But we're going to go ahead and replace that diaphragm. That's what this kit here is for, from Napa. Got a 2-1784. So we got this fuel pressure regulator diaphragm, and it does come with O-rings, but the O-rings that are in this kit are not the correct O-rings for replacing the transfer tube O-rings. So if you get this kit, don't think that this is going to help you. This is for multiple other cars that have the same fuel pressure regulator diaphragm. So just to go over that O-ring problem that I was saying is these O-rings, there's 9 of them. That's a whole kit, and it's an ACDelco 217-440 or a GM part number 17111-696. So this is the 9 fuel rail O-rings for doing this rebuild. So it covers the 2 here, the 2 on this transfer tube, the 2 on that transfer tube, the one that goes on this return tube, so the one O-ring that goes there, that goes into the front of the fuel pressure regulator, and then the one O-ring that goes on the cold start injector, and right there on the other side of the cold start injector goes in there. So those are the 9 O-rings. So that's one kit. And this Napa kit right here is the O-rings. There's 2 of them in this package. It's hard to see. This kit number is 2-18416. So these 2 O-rings, there's 2 of them in there. So those 2 O-rings go to the fuel pressure regulator, or the fuel rail fittings that go into the front transfer tube, or the front feed and return lines. So you will need those 2 to replace on the fittings that go on the front of the engine. So also need some silicone spray, because if you're going to go ahead and replace an O-ring, you want to do silicone spray rather than oil-based lubricant, because the oil can distort the fuel or distort the O-ring. And so the 100% silicone will help lubricate the O-rings so that they don't tear when you're installing them, and it helps lubricate them. That makes the installation easier. So we've opened up the ACDelco O-ring kit. Comes with the 9 O-rings. So the smallest one and the biggest one are for the cold start injector system. So the big one goes on the cold start injector at the base. The smallest one goes right there in the end of that tube for the cold start injector. The 4 that are similar, 2 of those go on the front transfer tube, and the other 2 that are the same size go to the rear transfer tube, and the 2 that are also identical, that are smaller than the transfer tube ones, go on this other transfer tube for that one. So that's what those 2 are for. And this leftover single one is for this fuel line, the fuel return that goes into the fuel pressure regulator. So that last one goes for that. Take the rings out of the transfer tube or any other item. You can use an O-ring pick like that. Get it under there and pull that out. And after you pull the O-rings off of there, then clean the transfer tube and the full O-ring sealing surface. Clean from any debris or any dust or dirt that's gotten in there. Same thing goes for this injector, for the cold start injector. Go ahead and take that off of there. And then clean the items. So some of these are really easy to pop off of here. And then just clean the ends of the tubes. Clean the inside of each one of the fuel rails, and then blow out any debris that might have fallen inside the fuel pressure regulator to any of that stuff. So just blow all that stuff out, get the debris out, because you don't want any of that debris ending up in your fuel pressure or your fuel injectors. So clean it out and then clean out the tubes.